Hey, what's going on, APUSH people? We have another good video for you today. This one is on the Constitutional Convention, key compromises, and the Federalist Papers. I want to give a shout out to Mr. Arn's class in Ohio near Dayton. Best of luck this year. You're going to do awesome. Thanks for the support, and go Reds. All right, so some background info on the Constitutional Convention. This will be your historical context. What's going on before this Constitution? Well, we have the Articles, if you remember. They were designed to have a weak central government because of a fear of monarchy. The Annapolis Convention was called in 1786 to improve trade within the Articles of Confederation. And for the most part, it was not a success, but the states did agree to meet a year later at Philadelphia, which will become the Philadelphia Convention. Only 5 states showed up, but Alexander Hamilton got the promise to meet the following year. And they will meet the following summer of 1787, which will be the Constitutional Convention. Okay, so the Constitutional Convention itself. Well, we had delegates from 12 states went to Philadelphia in 1787, not Rhode Island. They were afraid of being overpowered in a new government. What is the structure of the government that is established under the Constitution? Well, it's a limited government that has limits on what the federal government can do. So people realize they need to have a stronger central government, but they want to limit the power of this government. We see separation of powers and checks and balances inspired by Montesquieu, pictured here, with the 3 different branches of government. And we have federalism, which are powers that are divided between states and federal government. So for example, under the national or federal government, only they can coin money, declare war, make treaties, and establish post offices. So those are things that are delegated to the federal government. Things that are reserved for the states, that's the 10th Amendment, which we'll talk about in a bit. Education, licensing professionals, and marriage and divorce. And then both things that both states and the federal government can do are collecting taxes, enforcing laws, and borrowing and spending money. Those are examples of federalism. Be familiar with this topic. So there are several compromises that needed to be met at this convention. And perhaps the biggest issue was congressional representation. How would states be represented in Congress? Well, Virginia proposed a plan to have representation to be based on population. This would favor large states like Virginia. New Jersey proposed representation to be equal per state. They were afraid of smaller states, population-wise, being outnumbered by larger states. So they proposed something that's similar to the Articles of Confederation. A compromise is reached known as the Great Compromise, and this combines elements of the Virginia and New Jersey plan. One part of the legislature would be based on population. That's the House of Representatives, so that favors large population states. And one part would be equal representation. That's the Senate, and each state gets 2 senators per state. And that satisfied the small states and the New Jersey plan. Absolutely be familiar with the Great Compromise and the 2 plans in New Jersey and Virginia that went into it. So another issue is, how will slaves be counted towards population? Well, northern states did not want slaves to count towards population, and southern states did. So they agreed to have 3 out of 5 slaves, or 60% of slaves, would count towards representation in the House. And this is going to favor southern states because that's where most of slaves were located. The Slave Trade Compromise is another compromise that was reached, and they agreed that Congress could not outlaw the international slave trade until 1808, which they eventually will do. On January 1st, 1808, the international slave trade is outlawed. And if you want more info on this compromise, check out Cabinet Battle number 3 from the Hamilton mixtape. It does a great job discussing this issue. I'm going to reference the Hamilton musical a lot in the next coming videos. There's a lot of good music that helps break down this info. So now that the Constitution is set, there are some debates over ratifying or approving the Constitution. Federalists were groups of people that supported the ratification of the Constitution. So what do you think people who are against the ratification would be called? Look at you, gosh, you're such an AP genius. Anti-Federalist is correct. That will be people who oppose ratifying the Constitution. Now, the Federalist Papers will be written. This is a series of 85 essays written by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, our boy. And there are 85 essays to defend the Constitution and encourage ratification. It's basically 85 love letters for why the Constitution rocks. Federalist number 10 focuses on factions and controlling factions or groups of people. And Federalist 51 focuses on separation of powers and checks and balances. So here are two examples of why the Constitution is great and shows the limits of the power of the federal government. You'll learn more about this in AP Gov when you take it. So the question is, why did Anti-Federalists ultimately ratify the Constitution? We know enough states ratified it because we are living under the Constitution, and the answer is the Federalists promised to add a Bill of Rights. Star, circle, underline, highlight, Bill of Rights right now for me. It is that important. The Bill of Rights were not part of the original Constitution. Anti-Federalists were afraid that individual rights were not protected. So the Federalists said, listen, if you ratify the Constitution, we promise to add a Bill of Rights. And these are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and they restrict powers of the federal government and preserve liberties and freedoms. So how do they do that? Let's get into each amendment. The first amendment, I want you to think of 5 freedoms: religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. Second amendment is the right to bear arms. Third amendment is no quartering of troops in houses of citizens. Fourth amendment is no unreasonable search and seizures. So law enforcement needs a warrant when searching you or your house. Fifth amendment is a grand jury. No double jeopardy means if you're found not guilty, you can't be tried again for the same crime. And then you can't testify against yourself in court. You often hear people say, I plead the fifth, saying you don't have to answer questions to law enforcement about your actions. And finally, can't lose property, life, or liberty without a trial. That's all part of the Fifth Amendment. Jumping over to the Sixth Amendment, that guarantees a speedy trial, a right to an attorney, cross-examination, and witnesses that are favorable to your side. Seventh Amendment is a jury trial in a civil suit. Eighth Amendment forbids cruel and unusual punishment. The Ninth Amendment says that rights not listed are not necessarily denied. So just because a right is not listed in the Constitution doesn't mean it's denied to you. And finally, number 10 is what sets up federalism. Powers not delegated or given to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people. All right, let's do a quick recap. The Annapolis Convention, why was it important? The Great Compromise, no, the Virginia and New Jersey plans. Three-Fifths Compromise, what did that say? And when was the slave trade, international slave trade, outlawed? Federalist Papers, what were they? What was their purpose? Bill of Rights, know all 10 amendments, and why they were added to the Constitution. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Best of luck this year, and I look forward to seeing you back for more videos, and have a good day.